Laurel, why don't you introduce yourself and everyone can get to know you a little bit better and find out what you're going to be sharing with them today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here with you today. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's heartwarming. I'm looking through the list of participants and I see lots of familiar names. So hello to some of you who are my clients and those that I know. So a little bit about me. I own Laurel Co, which provides blended business and legal services to entrepreneurs. And I'm an attorney by background. I'm also a professional EOS implementer. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a system that many businesses throughout the world use to run their business. And the tools I'm going to teach you today are from EOS, but I'm excited to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Laurel. And again, if you do have any questions as this happens, and we would want to make sure that we give you the opportunity for her to answer them, please put it in the chat box. Additionally, I know Rosie sent out some documentation, so maybe a nice time to pull that up if you have the ability to pull that up on your screen, or maybe you printed it out. We'll be referring to these documents, the cash flow drive sheet as well as the rock sheet. So Laurel, I'm just going to have you start and talk more about what it is that you want to provide with us today. And let's go by it step by step so that we can make sure that everybody can jot the information that they need to jot down, and additional questions, I will make sure I let you know. So take it away, Laurel.
Great. Well, we're going to start today with how to shift your cash flow. So if you could, as Jennifer mentioned, just take a look at the 3 documents that Rosie sent out in the link. You don't have to print them off. You can simply look at them and reference them. But we're going to use those for the first part of this webinar.
And just to be clear, Laurel, is it the 8 cash flow drivers? Is that what we're looking at first?
Correct. So
I'm going to see if I can share that on my screen.
Perfect. Thanks, okay. Jennifer. There should be 3 pages there, and I will walk you through each page. There you go. Great. All right. So a good friend of mine often reminds me that cash is king, and he's right. Cash is very important. It was important before COVID-19, and it's just as important, if not more, after COVID-19 as we get to that after point. So we're going to talk about cash flow and how can you make adjustments, especially as we're coming out of this response phase and moving into this recovery phase. Now, your job as leaders, as you well know, is to obsess about this profitability and cash flow for your business. And that's why you're here today. And that's what we're going to focus on. So I look at cash flow, everything that brings good things into your business, through the lens of these cash flow drivers. Those are all the things that drive up cash flow and profit in your business. Now, it's obviously important to focus on these, and we'll walk step by step through how to do that today. But there's also this really great secondary benefit that I don't want you to miss. And that is when you really focus on your cash flow drivers, it gives you the opportunity to really help your leadership team be more aware. It brings more visibility and more accountability to your company, which is vital. So at the end of this session, you will have a tool and you'll have a lot of learnings to take back to your leadership team. So let's get into this tool. There are 3 components to it. The first component is defining your primary cash flow drivers, and we're going to do that on page 1 of the document. And there are some examples on page 2 that we'll get to. Then component 2 is critical, and that's assigning a single owner to each cash flow. Component 3 is setting a measurable goal around each cash flow driver. And then I'll wrap up by showing you how to really track these in your business. So let's start with component 1, and that's on page 1 and 2 of the handout. So how do we define what these primary cash flows are for your business? Well, what I'm going to ask you to do in a couple minutes is brainstorm all of those things in your business that have a positive impact on profitability and cash flow. So think of anything that may increase revenue, anything that may decrease expenses. So that's kind of what we mean by, that is what we mean by cash flow drivers. So if you go to page 2 of the handout, there are some examples here for you of cash flow drivers that my clients have used in the past. So things like cost of goods sold, price of services or products, errors or mistakes. Sometimes those are also categorized as maybe redundancies or places where you're not clear about your process and therefore lack of clarity is costing you money. Days in AR is a popular one. Compensation, labor costs is going to be big for you going forward. Service time has to do with how much time it is between services or how long does it take you to provide a service, for example. Ancillary sales is another example. So if you would please, at this moment, take 3 quiet minutes. And you can use that page 1, it looks like that wagon wheel, to just brainstorm all over it, or even on a white sheet of paper. Just brainstorm all of the cash flow drivers that you can think of in your business. Things that drive up cash flow and profitability, revenue, or decrease expenses. So we'll give you 3 quiet minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll process through that. Okay, why don't we come back together? And if you would be so kind as to take Jennifer up on her offer and just enter 1 cash flow driver from your list in the chat box so that we can share that. Maybe, as Jennifer said, we can get some ideas from each other. So your goal is to identify ultimately 6 to 10 cash flow drivers. Now you may have identified less, and that's okay. You may have identified more. And if you identified more than 6 or 10, my suggestion for you is to whittle that down and really think about what are the things that will make an absolute difference on driving up your cash flow and your profitability, and whittle that list down so that it's nice and tight around 6 to 10.
We have some comments here. It looks like somebody has written down signage. Kristen said cross-selling services and affiliate sales. Brianna said cost of labor, cost of reoccurring expenses like scheduling software, phones, etc.
Yeah.
So those are some great ideas.
Perfect. Yeah, love those. Thank you guys. Really good ideas. So let's move then into component 2. So now you have some brainstormed ideas. You're kind of getting the idea of what we mean by cash flow drivers. So once you get that list down ultimately to 6 to 10, which you can do, certainly after this webinar, the next component we want to make sure happens is we assign a single owner. That's so imperative as component number 2. Now, I know that some of you on the call or the webinar are a 1-person show. So when I say who is responsible or accountable and a single owner, you're thinking, yeah, Laurel, I'm it. And that's okay. But just for the sake of accountability, and trust me, it does make a difference psychologically somehow, write your name next to the cash flow drivers. So who is accountable? Laurel is accountable for this cash driver and this cash flow driver. If you have a team of people, so it's more than just yourself, perhaps you have another owner. I really encourage you to take this and use it with your team. They may have other ideas for you of cash flow drivers, but then you can assign them a cash flow driver and help them be or make them accountable for one of the cash flow drivers on your list. Now, when I say accountable, I don't mean own it, run with it in a vacuum. What I simply mean is someone's name is on it, 1 person only, please, because if 2 people are technically accountable, then really no one is accountable. but it just gives somebody ownership of something, and then that person is actively engaging in the goal and working toward making that cash flow driver happen. So one person assigned for each cash flow driver, and especially right now, I think our staff and our teams, even co-owners, whoever you have in your organizations or your businesses, could really benefit from having something that they're accountable for, a way that they can tangibly contribute. And it feels good to be kind of back in control of some things. And that's what we're talking about here, are things that you and your team can control in your organization to drive up profitability and cash flow. So component 2 is simple in a way, but it's assigning a single owner. So go through and assign owners to your cash flow drivers. Then the third component is to set a goal. So you improve or maximize your cash flow drivers by setting a measurable goal for improvement. And that key word is measurable. You don't want just a simple statement. So the ones that we read off on the chat is great as a description. Then your next step is to turn that into a measurable. So put a percentage there or a number there. So if it's about staff or another service that you want to launch, then perhaps set a target or a goal around that that's measurable. And one phrase I use a lot is, what does done look like? So to be crystal clear about what does it mean when you have achieved that goal around that cash flow driver, that's what we want to get to. So let me give you a couple examples. One is, if price is a cash flow driver, then a goal may be to increase the price of your service or product from $95 to $99. If cost of goods sold is a cash flow driver, then a goal may be to decrease cost of goods sold by 5%. If services provided is a cash flow driver, then a goal may be to decrease drive time between services by 35% per driver. That's one I borrowed from a client. So as you take this tool back into your organizations, your businesses, put some measurable goals, targets around your cash flow drivers, because that brings it to life. And then you have a clear sense of what done looks like. So Jennifer, I'll just pause there for a minute before we kind of wrap up this tool to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, if there's any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat box. And again, we're utilizing the handouts that Rosie had sent with everybody else. And I'm seeing page 3. Have we gotten there yet to the page 3 portion?
We are about to get there, Jennifer.
Okay, so make sure that's, everyone just make sure page 3 is handy.
Yeah.
Looks like everyone's still on board. So I'll go ahead and have you move forward.
Great. So as Jennifer mentioned, we're going to move to page 3. So just to recap here before we do, we've talked about the 3 components of cash flow drivers, which are defining them, identifying them, as we did with the brainstorming, and that was that wagon wheel with the examples in the handout pages 1 and 2. Then we need to assign a single owner. And then the third component was to set a goal that's measurable, so you know what done looks like around each cash flow driver. So now we're going to move to that last page, page 3, and we're going to talk about how to track this. And this is also key for you. So when we started, I said that cash flow drivers will really bring more awareness and visibility and accountability within your organization to all those things that drive cash and profit. So how do you do that? Well, one way is to track these cash flow drivers, and that's what page 3 refers to. So as referenced here, you can track these in your budget. You can track them through your P&L, or you can track them through your scorecard. And let me give you a few examples. So remember, we talked about the example of cost of goods sold as a cash flow driver. If you set a goal to decrease cost of goods sold by 5%, then you might accomplish that goal by renegotiating some vendor contracts. The way you track that is through your budget, because that's where cost of goods sold is going to show up in your business. Another example we used was service time as a cash flow driver. So if you set a goal to decrease drive time between services by 35% per driver, you would track that on your scorecard to see if you're making progress towards your goal of 35%, because you might start out at, gee, I don't even know how to track this. And then you might move on to, all right, we're at 5%, now we're at 10%, we're making progress here. So I want to pause a minute and just go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with you quickly around the word scorecard. Scorecard is something that I think is critical for every business. And so it's my passionate plea that you use a scorecard in your business. And what do I mean by that? I do not mean your budget, and I don't mean your P&L. What I mean are 5 to 15 numbers that tell you exactly how your business is doing. And if you could imagine this with me for a moment, think about you as the business owner on an island somewhere, and the only form of communication is by written letter. So your team sends you a letter every week with 5 to 15 numbers on it. That's it. And that alone has to tell you how your business is doing. That's what we're getting at when we say 5 to 15 numbers on a scorecard. And what you do is you identify those that are most critical for your business, and you track those every week. It's a rolling 13 weeks. And so you pretty soon have a paper that's covered with numbers. But these are numbers that you look at every week because you're saying that those are critical for your business. So cash flow drivers are a great thing to track on your scorecard because it tells you if you're on track toward the goal of moving your cash flow driver forward to really make a difference in your business. So if everybody's good with cash flow drivers, I want to summarize and then move on to rocks. So Jennifer, maybe I'll pause one more minute and just see if we have any questions.
Yeah, and just a reminder too, this is being recorded. So if you want to go back, re-listen, I highly recommend that. This is a lot to digest in just one sitting. So, I think that instead of having you summarize it again, Laurel, we'll just remind people they can go back and rewind. And let's move on to rocks. And this is the other sheet that you have, right?
Yes, that's the next sheet, correct. Yes, and I appreciate you mentioning that, Jennifer. I usually teach cash flow drivers to my clients in an hour to an hour and a half session. So you guys are rock stars that you're moving through so quickly on this. But yeah, definitely go back and rewatch if you need to get some clarity around that.
Yeah, and Laura will be sharing her information. So the hope is if you have additional questions that maybe you don't want to ask publicly, you can get a hold of Laurel after this. So let me pull up that rock sheet for you as you go ahead and introduce this.
Perfect. So this is about our second topic, which is how do you adjust your business plan and remain agile? And I use a concept called rocks, and I'm going to teach that to you today so you can use that right away in your business to create this, what I call a 90-day world for your business. So we know that moving from this response phase to a recovery phase is going to require all of you to really be laser focused on the most important things and priorities for your business. More than ever, it is easy to get distracted by shiny objects. It's easy to stray off course. A lot of people right now feel really overwhelmed. And so kind of our human response to that is, well, I'm either going to put my head down and work myself into a frenzy, or you're kind of frozen. We also, in this time period, have a tendency more than ever to go to those things that are our comfort zone and feel comfortable to us because we know them and we're good at them. But really, this recovery phase is going to require us to be outside our comfort zone more than ever so that we can reset, recover, and move business forward. So I want to start this second part with an analogy by Stephen Covey, and many of you may be familiar with this. But this is kind of an analogy of how we often prioritize our time and what goes on in our business. So if you picture with me kind of a glass cylinder on a table, and the cylinder represents your time and what goes on in your business. And obviously we all know that time is finite. So what happens is that most people fill the cylinder with water first. Water represents everything that's coming at you in a day. Then sand. Sand are all those daily interruptions, those people who walk into your office and stand in your doorway, or, are constantly pinging you with text messages from home. Then the next thing that often comes in are pebbles, which represent your day-to-day tasks. And then finally, we try to put these rocks in a cylinder. And rocks represent the big priorities, the things that have to get done to really move your business forward. But obviously, from this analogy, you can figure out that if we try to fill our cylinder this way, the rocks just simply don't fit. And I know I hear from clients all the time, Laurel, I just can't get to working on my business because I'm so frantic working in my business. Well, the rocks are the on the business part, and it requires us to prioritize that differently. So if you put the rocks into the cylinder first, you'll find that then everything, the pebbles, the sand, the water, fits very nicely around it, and it all fits in the cylinder. And that's what we're trying to get to. So setting rocks is very critical for your business. I know many of you have a business plan, but now I would suggest it's the time to reconsider that business plan and really think about what you need to do in the next 90 days to move your business forward. So rocks consist of those top 3 to 7 priorities for your company over the next 90 days. And maybe think of rocks as 90-day goals for your business. These are things that you can control, a giant high-level punch list, if you will. And I know I've heard from some of you, gosh, 90 days just feels too long, Laurel, and that's fine. If you want to pare this down in this time to 30 days or to 60 days and create that world for your company, that's absolutely fine. But it's critical that you keep your number of rocks to no more than 7, because less is more. And if everything is important, nothing is important, and it just doesn't get done. So when you create the 3 to 7 rocks, then you create also this kind of 90-day time frame, and it really then creates a 90-day world for your company. And that allows you to be more agile. It really breaks down your business plan into smaller bites. It allows you to reevaluate your business plan, maybe change some of the priorities that are facing your business, especially for those of you who are facing reopening. But it really brings a lot of clarity and focus, I find. And I have to say, this is one of the single best things that I've done in my own business to really keep me on track. And then what happens is we do this for 90 days, and I'll walk you through how to set these rocks in a minute. But the idea is that you set them and you work on them for 90 days. Then at the end of 90 days, something happens to us as humans. We kind of begin to stray and lose our way. We wander off a little bit. And it's just what happens around kind of days 80 to 90 for some reason psychologically for us. So that's why these are 90-day worlds that we're creating, or less, as I said, if you need to. But generally speaking, you want to do this every 90 days. So at the end, you look back on the previous 90 days. You say, what did I accomplish? How did it go? And then you set new rocks for your next 90 days for your company. And ultimately, the idea is that you set rocks 4 times, that equals your 1-year plan. So you're constantly kind of moving toward that, but it still creates it in kind of a bite-sized way.
And I think that's a great way of putting it, Laurel, and the fact that, the bite-sized pieces at this point in time, I think is probably going to be most efficient and going to have the best outcome, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So I'd like in a minute for you to take a couple quiet minutes again, and we're just going to brainstorm. So I want you to brainstorm everything that you can think of, and you're only going to have a couple minutes to do this, so certainly you'll have time afterwards. But the things that you need to get done in your business in the next 90 days, or if that's too long for you, 30 or 60, but things that are important. Don't get into the weedy details. Don't kind of think about, well, I need to redo my website, which means I have to do these 500 things that go into that. If the rock is redo my website, that's it. That's your rock right there. So take a couple, let's do 3, Jennifer, quiet minutes for everybody to just brainstorm priorities for their business over the next 90 days. Okay, so let's come back from your 3 quiet minutes and just debrief on that for a minute here. For some of you, that may have been easier. You have a laundry list. For some of you, that may have been hard to think about, my goodness, what is it exactly that I need to focus on in the next 90 days for my business? I would really encourage you, if your list is not 3 to 7 items long, to take that to your team or a co-owner, or to think about that more yourself. If you did have more than 7, then what I would encourage you to do next is something I call keep, kill, or combine. So I often will brainstorm and have 15 to 20 items on my list for my business. And then I go back through and I decide which ones I'm going to keep, which ones I'm going to kill, because they just aren't like life and death critical priorities as I look back at the list and kind of look at all of what I've written down. So I kill those, draw a line through them, or combine, because sometimes things go together that you didn't realize when you were just brainstorming. So after the webinar, I'd encourage you to continue brainstorming, number 1. And then number 2, once you've done that, go back through and keep, kill, or combine items that you've written down on your list. And the goal, again, is to get them down to 3 to 7. And another good kind of cue that I use is, think of it this way. Are the 3 to 7 items on this list the absolute highest and best use of my time? And honestly, that's something I ask myself all throughout the day. Anytime I'm about to touch something, a task, or go do something, I think, is this the highest and best use of my time right now? So that's maybe something that's helpful for you.
Yeah, and look, we've got some comments here, Laurel, from people with some great ideas. Contact previous customers, update pricing, investors for project build, and automate more systems. So
yeah, nice.
There you go. Yeah, we've got people thinking, and they'll continue to do so. Can we move on to the quarterly rock sheet? We're going to maybe spend about 5 minutes on that, and I want to leave enough time for people to have any questions. So let's work through this rock sheet. I'll pull it up right now and go ahead.
Great. So what you see on your quarterly rock sheet then is a place for you to write in your 3 to 7. There are 5 lines there because I'm encouraging you to be a little on the shy side of the items, but you can certainly add in number 6 and number 7. So write those in. And when you get to the point where you're going to write them on your rock sheet, I really encourage you to write them in a SMART way. And many of you have heard of a SMART goal, but basically that's just, again, it's saying who is responsible, and there's a line there for you to fill in the name. The same applies as it did for cash flow drivers around accountability. It doesn't mean that person does this in a vacuum. It just means that they are coordinating efforts. One person only, please. You also want to make sure that it's a timeline. So if these are 90-day rocks, then maybe you push the date out to July or August, but you indicate the date that it'll be done. And then be clear about what done looks like, so that you know when you get to the end of the 90 days, it's very clear if you can say, yes, it was done, or no, it wasn't. And then you have the quarterly rocks at the top there written in, and these are your company rocks. These are your priorities. This is now your 90-day world for your business. It allows you to be more agile and adjust to what's happening in the moment. And these rocks are the things that you do first. You put them into your container first. And you need to spend at least 25% of your time every day working on these company rocks to make sure that you're moving them forward. So you work on your business, not just in it. And then you see down below this whole section with names. And so the idea here is that as you begin to use this tool throughout your business, you can bring this to your team. And if Rosie and Jennifer, for example, are on my team, then it would be Laurel in the first name slot, Rosie in the second name slot, and Jennifer in the third name slot. And maybe I am going to take accountability for one rock, and Rosie is going to take accountability for one rock, and then Jennifer the same. And so we write those in those number ones there across the page. But then I may also have some individual rocks, and that's what this section is here below. So an individual rock for me may be something I need to accomplish that's a priority in my area of responsibility, but it's not necessarily a company rock. So that's what that section below is for. As you roll this tool out and use it within your business, it helps bring accountability to your whole team. The other beautiful thing here is we often fight over resources, and we often complain or sometimes are passive aggressive with our teammates about the fact that they have things that they're working on that we don't think are priorities. And this tool is beautiful because it takes that away. If Jennifer and Rosie and I are all on a team, we now all agree on the priorities for the company and the things that we're all working on. And so I have nothing to say to Jennifer and Rosie about the time that they're spending other than to cheer them on and hope that they accomplish their things, their rocks, because we all agreed on them. So it really takes away some of that angst at times within teams. So I will stop there before I talk just a minute about how to use these rocks with your cash flow drivers and staffing decisions to see if we have any questions, Jennifer.
Doesn't seem like we have any questions right now. So if we could just go ahead and move on. And I want to give them, I know you're going to wrap this up here, but again, reminding everybody that you can go back and rewind to watch this webinar and make sure that if you do have any questions, we're going to share Laurel's information so that you can, directly talk to her about your particular business should you need to. So maybe just a few more minutes if we could, Laurel.
Perfect. So if we go back to cash flow drivers, so if you, let's say, set a goal to decrease cost of goods sold by 5%, great goal, great thing to drive cash flow in your business because it decreases your expenses, your cost of goods sold. Well, maybe you say to yourself, I have no idea how to do that. I don't know what vendor contracts we have. I don't know what that all entails. Then create a rock around it. So you can use rocks to accomplish things on your cash flow driver sheet that maybe you aren't sure of yet. And those are perfect rocks. Another way rocks are great for helping you is with staffing. So I get this question a lot. Laurel, how in the world do I decide who I'm going to bring back from furlough or staff who are laid off? And this is your answer. So once you create this 90-day world for your company, you have a clear understanding of the priorities, the things you need to focus on over the next 90 days. And that allows you to then bring the people back that are most directly going to impact those rocks and that 90-day world that you've just created for your company. Doesn't mean other people aren't important, but it gives you some clarity and focus then around who to bring back and potentially in what order. So I just offer that as two suggestions around how to bring your cash flow drivers into your rocks and to focus on that in your 90-day world, and then how to use those to help you make your staffing decisions.
Laurel, thank you so much for all of your insight and expertise on this subject. I love the handouts, a lot of opportunity for people to really dig deep and find that time to actually fill that out and move forward. Last question for you. How can people get a hold of you, Laurel?
Yes, you can definitely email me at, and I'm happy to give out my email address, or Rosie or Jennifer, if you'd be willing to type it in the chat for me. It's just Laurel at laurelandco.com. So
all right.
Laurel at laurelandco.com. And I did want to offer this. I just so appreciate everyone's time today. I know this is a really challenging time for everyone. And many of the tools that I taught today, concepts I talked about, are part of, as I mentioned, the entrepreneurial operating system that are all interconnected. So I touched 2 tools out of about 30 in the toolbox and in the system. But the system's described in a book called Traction. I know many of you have read that, but if you haven't, I am offering a free copy of Traction to you today, just because I really want to make sure that you're moving your business forward in really positive ways. So as my gift to you for taking this time, I'd love the chance to do that. So if you're interested in that, please get a hold of Rosie, and she will make sure to get you my contact information, and I will mail you a book for your reading pleasure.
All right, Laurel, so kind of you to do that.
Thank you, everyone. We'll wrap up real quickly. I will send those documents as a Word document. I know someone just asked if they could have it so he could fill it in, so I will go ahead and send those out. And if you're interested, as Laurel mentioned, please get a hold of me and I will pass your information along. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.